Welcome to Vancouver. Thank you. There you go. I'm thrilled to welcome you to Vancouver. It is my hometown. I'm especially thrilled that I didn't have to get on a plane to be here. I just had to walk 2 blocks. So welcome, welcome. It is great to help you open up your conference. As was said in my introduction, I want to help you over the next hour understand the fundamentals of storytelling and how you can use storytelling to elevate, to influence, and to inspire others. And in doing so, help build this brand, this profession of dietitians in Canada, one story at a time. Because we're going to be spending the next hour or so together in the spirit of getting to know each other just a little bit better, I want to tell you about a time when I first appreciated the power of storytelling, but not really appreciated it, not only appreciated it, but also benefited from it. When I was a kid, I grew up with 3 siblings. I had an older brother, a younger brother, and a younger sister. That's us there, proving to the world that we could clean up nice when we had to, and proving to my mother that we could sit still for 10 seconds to take a photo. In case you're wondering, that's me there, that angelic little cherub on the stairs. So, anyway, we were a rowdy bunch. We were what my grandmother would call a handful. We could be tough on people, and we were especially tough on babysitters. We ate babysitters for lunch, especially my brothers and I. Anytime a babysitter came in, a new babysitter came into our house, my brothers and I would look at each other and say, "Oh, we're going to make her cry." Now, I'm not proud of that, mind you. I'm just being honest here. So as a result of this, we had a revolving door of babysitters come into our house. And my parents had to go to increasingly greater distances to find new babysitters as we burnt out old ones. Now, my dad taught at a prep school in Northeast Ohio, and the day after school finished, my parents would load us up in the station wagon and take us up to our summer house in the mountains of Pennsylvania, where we would spend most of July and August up there. It was a wonderful community to be in for the summer. When I was about 7 years old, my parents had the brilliant idea to bring a babysitter up for the summer so they could play golf during the day, play tennis, tool around with their friends, make sure that someone was watching over us so we weren't killing each other or killing someone else. So, enter Stephanie. That's Stephanie there. Stephanie was the daughter of the comptroller who worked at the prep school that my dad taught at. She was about 17. She knew my parents. She knew of us. And yet, for some strange reason, decided to take the job anyway. So, Stephanie joined us for the summer, and my brothers and I were convinced that she was there to control our summer and be the good cop or the bad cop. She was going to be the bad cop all of the time, a virtual fun sucker. And we were ready for this scenario to play out on that first morning that Stephanie was with us when my parents headed off to the golf course. We planned, we strategized, we agreed not to let any one of us fall behind if we got in a skirmish with Stephanie, except for my younger sister who fell in love instantly with Stephanie the minute she walked in the door, so we branded her a traitor and agreed to sacrifice her to the cause if it came to that. So we were all geared up. We're not going to listen to Stephanie or engage with her. And this scenario played out, I remember, on that first morning. Stephanie was in the kitchen, and she looked at me and said, "What kind of cereal do you want for breakfast, Billy?" And I defiantly said, "Cereal? Who said anything about cereal? I didn't ask for cereal. I'm not eating cereal. You can't make me eat cereal." And I was holding my breath, gearing up for a fight with Stephanie, and she just kind of calmly looked at me and said, "Yeah, okay then." And then she poured herself a bowl of cereal and poured a bowl of cereal for our traitor sister. This scenario played out a couple of times over the morning when she suggested that we go down to the beach for a swim or go for a walk in the woods, but we were having none of it. We were literally drunk with defiance. After lunch, Stephanie came up to us and called a meeting. And my brothers and I were convinced that this was where she was going to lay down the laws for the summer. And so we walked into that meeting with our shoulders up, our minds closed, ready for her to lecture us for an hour or so. But instead, Stephanie sat down and said, "You know what? I want to tell you a story. I want to tell you a story about my babysitter, Mary Fitzpatrick." And Stephanie told us about how Mary came to see her and stay with her for 2 weeks when her parents went on a vacation in Europe. And how Stephanie was convinced that Mary was going to be all discipline all the time, and she was gearing up for the worst. But on that first morning, Mary sat down with her and looked at her and said, "So, young lady, what do you want to do?" And Stephanie looked at her and said, "What do you mean, what do I want to do?" Convinced this was some sort of trick question. And Mary said, "What do you want to do over these 2 weeks? Who do you want to be at the end of these 2 weeks? Who do you want to become?" And Stephanie said she thought about it, And then she talked to Mary and she said, you know what? I've always wanted to be a baker. I've always wanted to learn how to bake. Not easy bake, oven bake, but really bake. I want to learn how to make cookies and cupcakes and pies and cakes with beautiful icing and those little flowers on them. And Mary looked at her and said, all right, then that's what we'll do. We will turn you into a baker. And for the next 2 weeks, Stephanie said that Mary taught her how to bake. They went to the library, they checked out books on baking, they bought bags of flour and sugar, and she made cookies and then cupcakes and pies. And she even made a beautiful, admirably decorated cake for when her parents came home from their vacation. Stephanie said that she thinks she gained about 20 pounds over those 2 weeks, which I recognize is not the sort of thing you want to say to a room full of dietitians. But she also gained a mentor, gained a coach, gained an ally. And she said that any time her parents went on vacation for an extended period of time after that, Stephanie would ask if Mary could come stay with her. And every time Mary did stay with her, Stephanie would learn something new and learn something new about herself. And as she was sharing that story, you could see the change in how we saw Stephanie as a result of that story. Our shoulders dropped, our minds opened. We stopped looking at each other in defiant solidarity and started instead focusing on Stephanie and what she was saying. I don't remember exactly what Stephanie said after that because I was only 7, so that was like 20 years ago. But not really. But she did say something like, look, I'm not here to control your summer. I'm here to help you get more out of the summer. There are rules and there are boundaries that we have to set, and those rules and boundaries are there for a reason, she told us. But I don't want to spend all of our time over the summer focusing on those rules and boundaries. Instead, I want us to think about what we can do within those rules and boundaries. And then she looked at me and my brothers and she said, so what do you want to do this summer? Who do you want to be at the end of it? Who do you want to become? And my older brother Hal talked about wanting to learn how to build tree forts in the woods, and I talked about wanting to learn how to dive off the high dive and maybe do a backflip, and my younger brother Dean talked about wanting to learn how to catch snakes and toads and salamanders, and I remember Stephanie not being too thrilled about that one. And my little sister Elizabeth, who was 2.5, didn't really say anything. She was like chewing on her hand or something. But you know, as Stephanie shared that story and then used that story to transition into a conversation with us, you could feel the dynamic of our relationship with her changing, and it changed forever. Stephanie was still our babysitter, and she was always our babysitter, but she really became part of our family. And those rules, we quickly learned, were not negotiable, and those boundaries unbudgeable, because we pushed those rules and boundaries. We were kids, after all. It was our job to do that. But we always figured out what we could do within them, and every summer, Stephanie would sit down with us and ask us, what do you want to do? Who do you want to become? And then she'd help us achieve those goals. Stephanie stayed with us for 5 summers. And I remember one time in that 5th summer, as she was heading into her last year of university, she was walking with us all down to the beach. And Stephanie said to us, listen, this is going to be my last summer with you. Because later on this year, I'm going to get married to Mike, the guy who had just come up the week beforehand to see her. And as she shared that news, I burst into tears. I burst into tears because I could not imagine life without Stephanie. But Stephanie stayed in our lives, and she's always stayed in our lives, just in a different way. That's us at Stephanie's wedding. The guy on the left there is me with my hand in my pocket for some reason, like I'm some English gentleman or something. Anyway, she has been part of our lives. In fact, I was communicating with her last week to get these pictures to share this story with you. I wanted to share that story with you of Stephanie because Stephanie was a great storyteller. She used storytelling all the time, and especially that story about her babysitter, Mary. And the thing about her stories is they would engage and entertain us, but as they engaged us, they would enlighten us. They would get us to think differently. And as they enlightened us, they would inspire us. They would get us to feel differently. Stephanie's stories always made a point that made a change in the way we saw a situation, the way we felt about that situation, and the way we acted as a result.